Hey, what's going on everybody? My name is Cruz and welcome back to another video. And this one I'm going to show you what's in my current gig bag right now for the year 2021. Let's get it. You know the deal, guys. Before we get started, please do all of the things that help this channel grow. Like this video, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell icon so you get an alert every single time I upload a video. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so I just recently did a video on the actual gig bag itself, so I'm not going to discuss this one too much. It's an SKB bag that operates sort of like a hard shell case, but still functions like a gig bag. Has split bag straps, pockets, all of the things that you basically need without feeling like your guitar isn't going to be protected. So I really enjoy this gig bag. I can't say enough about it. This is like my 20th video on this gig bag. I've had it for years and years now, so I highly recommend it. Now let's talk about what's inside. The first thing that you'll find in my gig bag is this small Pelican case. I originally bought this just to house my in-ears, but I realized it had a little more space in it, so I thought it would be kind of cool if I put the things that I would normally travel with in here anyway that I want protected. The great thing about this Pelican case is that it's actually waterproof and really sturdy, so it protects everything that's inside of here, which I really love, and it's small enough to still put inside of a gig bag or any bag, to be perfectly honest with you. So I have zero problems traveling with this thing, and I actually really love it. I didn't think I would use it as much as I actually do, and totally worth the purchase. So now this is turning into like what's in the box within the box, right? Because now I'm going to open up the Pelican case and show you what's in there. So we open up the Pelican case, and the first thing that I see, my slide. This is a brass slide that I've been using for quite some time now. Full disclosure, maybe I should share this during a story time video, but I've had this slide for years and years now, but it never fit my fingers. About 2 years ago, I decided to go on a diet, and I lost about 80 pounds, and I'm proud of that. But I couldn't fit any slides onto my fingers. They were so chunky, so I had to actually use this slide that was meant to be a dual purpose slide, where it was like a ring slide. You could turn it, and so your finger would be exposed, and then you could bring it back so it would have the slide on it. I didn't buy that slide because I wanted to use that feature. I bought that slide because it was open, and it was the only slide that actually fit comfortably around my chubby fingers, because even though I'm a lot thinner, I still have pretty large hands. But now that I've lost the weight, I've actually been able to use this slide on my pinky, which is really convenient. I guess you could say a proud moment, being a little bit thinner and being able to use a normal slide like everybody else, and not have to like custom make a slide for my big old fat hands. So that's the slide. The other thing that you'll see right away is my G7 Capo. This is the art version. I switched over to the art version about, I want to say about a year ago now, maybe. And that was because of the vintage style radius neck that I currently have on my Nash T52 guitar. So this is supposed to be a better version for vintage style radius necks, and I don't know, the other one was just as fine. In fact, I still keep it here in my studio. I'm saying here because it's literally right here. This is a lot of money worth of capos right here, but I gotta be honest with you, the G7 capos are the best ones I've ever used. They keep the guitar very much in tune. I use them even in the studio. I never would think of using a capo in the studio because I wanted the best intonation possible while I'm in the studio, but they work so good that I use them even when I'm in the studio. And they're so easy to, change keys and to, to place them onto the fret and to move them up and down the fret, because it's just this like, tension push thing that's like amazing. So if you don't know about these, or if you haven't tried one, I highly recommend that you try it. The price is a little bit scary, but when you try it, you realize, oh, it's totally justifiable. The next thing you're going to find in my Pelican case are my in-ears. These are the Shure 215s. Very kind of industry standard. I don't play out live as much as I used to, so I don't feel the need to right now invest into like these high grade in-ears. I don't use in-ears in the studio. I prefer speakers and just sitting in front of my monitors, and then if I have to use headphones, I prefer over the ear ones and not in-ears. But these are really great for playing out live. I never had a problem with these, even though I don't play as much live as I used to. I did play a lot through these, I'd say a couple of years, and they have been fantastic, specifically for guitars. Now, I'm not the kind of person who likes to have everything in my in-ears, so the 215s have worked for me. They are a single driver in-ear. If you want to have drums and bass and stuff really kicking, you want to look into dual drivers. I'm the kind of person who just wants to hear my guitar, the click track, and then everything else very, very little in my in-ears, and so the single drivers have been perfect. And then they have this like mid-range presence thing that I really like about them, which lend themselves well to the guitar. Next, you'll find a bunch of picks in here. Now I have a few different kind of picks for trying some stuff out. Not that I would use them live, but more so in the studio. Maybe I'm playing acoustic. I have stuff that maybe lend themselves a little better to acoustic style playing. But for the most part, I have my main picks in here, which are my Gravity picks. I use the Gravity 1.5 Minis. They're the equivalent of like a jazz pick, but they have a little, I don't know, they're just a little wider than your average jazz pick. And I think they have an amazing tone to it, not to mention the color. You drop one of these things and it's because it kind of glows, you can see it from a mile away. So I really like that because Lord knows I've dropped my pick like 100 million times. In fact, if you follow me on Instagram, I posted a story a couple of weeks ago where I actually found a pick inside of my MIDI keyboard. This thing right here. I heard something in the MIDI keyboard. I thought maybe something was loose. I opened it up so I could repair it, and it ended up being a pick. A pick! Anyway, Gravity picks, you're amazing. Then I have this Groove Gear. I don't even know what this is called, but this is supposed to be like a string dampener type of a thing. You wrap this around your strings and you could do things like tapping or like droning, and it's supposed to kind of help mute the other strings so you can focus less on palm muting everything and focus more on actually playing the string you want to play. I have to admit to you, I rarely use it. I used to use it a lot more back in the day, but I've just learned to, with like my hand technique, my right hand technique, to block off the other strings, even when playing slide. So I don't use it as much anymore, but it's a great tool to travel with, especially to recording sessions. I think this is one of those things that you never know when you're going to need it. Though I don't pull it out all the time, I'm always glad I have it as a backup. And that's pretty much everything that's in the Pelican case. I have a lot of different picks. You may be able to see them. I don't think the camera's picking it up. Other than that, those are the basics that are in the Pelican case right now. The next thing that you're going to find in my gig bag is this radial DI box and this very short 1/4 inch cable. I've been traveling with this ever since I started using the HX Stomp, and the reason being is because the HX Stomp does not have an XLR out. It has just a 1/4 inch out. The average venue, including my home church where I would normally play, does not provide me with a 1/4 inch cable to the board. They typically hand you an XLR, whether it's going to be a mic attached to the end of that, or you can disconnect the mic and they expect you to put it into whatever unit you're traveling with if you're going direct out. So I found that it was a lot easier for me to travel with this. I felt like it was a safer bet. I understand that I could easily get one of those XLR to 1/4 inch converter things, but for me, I prefer this method. Moving on, I actually always travel with a secondary capo. And I know where you're asking yourself, why do you bring multiple capos? So one capo is used for actual playing. The G7 capo that you heard me talk about before is what I would use in a performance. This capo is what I actually use to change strings. So as you guys know, on all of my main guitars, specifically my Telecaster, I use a Bigsby, and changing strings on a guitar with a Bigsby could be a little bit challenging, but I found that if you use a capo on the 12th fret to hold the strings in place, it lets both of your hands loose to be able to hold the string around the peg and then go into the headstock and the whole nine. And maybe I'll make an updated video about how I do that. I do have a video on that on my channel. The video is kind of old, but it's definitely useful information. I never leave home without this particular capo because it's the perfect one for resting and holding all the strings in place. It has a very flat radius and it allows me to really pinch the strings down so I can do my work and not worry about the strings as I'm changing them specifically with the Bigsby. On the subject of strings, you can't change strings without strings themselves. I always have at least one set of strings in my gig bag at all times, one complete set. This is actually not the size that I use, but still is the brand. This is the Diodario NYXLs. For me, one of the best strings I've played in a really long time. So when I switched over to these, the difference was night and day in terms of the tone, the feel of the strings, the way they broke in so easily, the way they reacted, everything about them. So I highly recommend the NYXLs. These are 9s right now. I do sometimes put 9s on one of my Telecasters because I think that the 9s, there's something about the thinness of that string that sounds good to my ears. But I noticed it on my T52, it doesn't sound good. In fact, I tried switching over to 9s on that guitar and I feel like I ruined the guitar, so I went back to 10s immediately. So I usually use 10s, but I don't like to leave my house without having strings in my gig bag. So even though these are the wrong sizes, I still travel with them in the event that I break a string and I gotta change them really quickly. At least I have something. Which reminds me, I have to go buy strings. So you can't successfully change strings without having the tools to change it. So I travel with all of this stuff, believe it or not, in my gig bag. Let's talk about one by one what they are. First, let's talk about the pencil. I usually travel with a pencil. Two reasons, right? One is because I am the kind of person that I memorize things after I write them. I'm pretty sure there's other people like me who do the same thing, but I tend to remember things a lot better if I write them down. Not because I need to look at the sheet again, but just the act of writing it forces my brain to remember it. It's just weird. So I tend to write things down. So I always travel with some sort of piece of paper and a pencil. But the real reason I use it is because when I change strings, I like to draw in between each nut slot. Because, you know, it's the old school way of like sort of lubricating your nuts, especially when you're using a Bigsby and you're forcing those strings to go back and forth. I really believe that using something like this kind of a trick helps. It doesn't solve problems, but it helps. I still use this method, love it, and at this point it's just become a part of the process. There's something about changing strings as well that I enjoy. There's like this process of woosah that you have to do it and you have to relax, like to watch or listen to something and just change strings. I get the same feeling when I'm, you know, lacing up a pair of sneakers. I don't know. I'm weird. Then I have some other tools like this little ruler here. This just helps me with understanding where my action is in comparison to the guitar. Really good to have. Not enough guitarists travel with this, but this will give you a lot of insight as to why your setup is not correct, or when you do have a good setup and you just maybe stumbled upon it. Go ahead and take measurements so you can understand how you can re-achieve that again. So if you write down some of the settings that you have at that moment, then it'll be easier for you to adjust your guitar down the road when your guitar is not quite the same. When, you know, inevitably the neck will move, maybe the bridge saddle will move a little bit as well. All that stuff just happens over time. So understanding measurements could easily be the problem solver for getting a great setup. Having a multi-tool such as this screwdriver right here has been really convenient for me. It also has this bolt tightener mechanism on top, and I want to tighten up the pegs on top of my headstock. It's easy to do that with this mechanism up here. So really convenient tool. So the other thing that I have in terms of multi-tools is this very old, I think I've had it for like over 15 years now, very old multi-tool that turns into a needle nose plier. It has a bunch of different tools and attachments to it, but to be honest with you, it's so old I don't use any of the attachments that come with it. It also used to be able to cut strings, you know, the extra string length when you change them. It doesn't do that anymore. It's so old, but I still keep it in my gig bag because, believe it or not, this needle nose plier thing has come in handy so many times. I can't even count. I can't even tell you how many times this thing has saved me. So definitely a great tool to have. Carry one of these in your book bag for sure. But I do think it's time for me to upgrade. Obviously, it's really difficult to change strings without a string winder. If you're not carrying one of these, honestly, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. You can make changing strings a lot easier and a lot quicker if you have one of these in your gig bag. I also carry around this wire cutter specifically to cut the extra length on strings after I change them, but to be honest with you, I use them more for cutting zip ties. If you're like me and you've worked on your pedal board as much as I have, then you know that cutting zip ties can be a pain in the butt. Using snips like these will definitely be a lifesaver for you. So definitely a multi-purpose tool. Yes, I can cut strings with it, but I do use it oftentimes to cut zip ties. Lastly, on the tool list, I always carry around this Allen wrench set for working on my guitars, whether it's the guitar neck adjustments or these little pegs to work on the bridge of my Telecasters. All of them are definitely useful, and I think every guitarist should walk around with one of these. I mean, maybe you don't need every single size, but I always carry around all of them just in case. You never know. I've been walking around with a hard drive, and this is one of my 1 terabyte hard drives that I keep here in my studio. I have a lot of them. They're all over my studio, and I always grab some. I try to keep everything organized, but I'm pretty sure I have videos on here. I have videos on another one. I have music on. I'm just all over the place with my hard drives, but I always carry around one because you just never know when you have to pull and grab a session and take it somewhere. Or maybe, for example, I was working with a producer who hired me to do a remote session and then hired me the very next week to do an in-person session. So instead of sending him the remote session through WeTransfer or whatever, I actually brought it in my hard drive and the very next week and gave him the session right there in person. That's another pro tip. If you're going to be using hard drives like that, then you want to make sure that you are formatting your hard drive as an open format so that this hard drive could be read both with PC and iOS devices, so you have no issues reading this hard drive on any computer that you would use, or specifically any operating system that you might use on that particular computer. And lastly, of course, I can't tell you what's in my gig bag without talking about the guitar itself, and that is my Nash T52. Now this particular gig bag can hold two different types of guitars, my Telecasters and Strat style guitars. I have two particular Telecasters that mean a lot to me. It's my Cruz custom build that I've had for forever, and then this Nash T52 that my wife bought for me. I also have a Strat style guitar that I travel with sometimes as well, so that case can carry either one of those guitars, which is really convenient. But for the most part, this is the guitar that I'm taking everywhere with me, and this is the guitar that I think that most people expect from me in terms of that sound. So I don't really bring too many guitars to sessions anymore like I used to, because at the end of the day, if they're hiring me for that Cruz style ambient thing, then they want me to bring the Tele, and that's the sound they want. So I don't really waste my time bringing too many other guitars anymore, because 9 times out of 10, this is the guitar that it's gonna get the job done. And almost 98% of the time, this is the guitar that I'm going to bring with me to almost every single live situation. We can't talk about the guitar though without mentioning at least the strap. I've talked about this strap on this channel plenty of times before. This is an Eso Strap. It has this really amazing ergonomic contour to it that wraps around your neck and your shoulder. Absolutely perfect. I'll show you. Boom. And it never touches your neck. It always stays right there as is because of the way that it's cut out, and it sits perfectly every single time. It's perfect for when you're in the studio sitting down, or when you're out at a session, or playing out live on a stage. It just stays right there. It doesn't slide. It doesn't loosen over time. It's honestly the greatest strap I've ever used, hands down. Not to mention, if you do play out live a lot, I have not used any form of like strap holder on my guitars for a long time since I switched over to the ESO straps. Typically I would have like a rubber piece there, or maybe even use a washer. Because this leather is so solid and so strong, I never worry about it coming out. So I don't know, man, this is definitely the greatest strap I've ever used. I bought them for each of my guitars. I think they fit my style aesthetically, and also just they're amazing. They're comfortable, they're well padded, and I can't say enough about them. And this is not an endorsement. They don't even know I exist, but I appreciate you guys. Okay, that wraps it up. That's everything that's currently in my gig bag in the year 2021. If you made it this far in the video, please let me know in the comment section if there's something that you have in your gig bag that I don't have, that you think I should be bringing along with me everywhere that I go. I'm really interested in seeing what comparatively what I bring versus what some of you may bring at your sessions or your gigs or your events. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do all of the things to help this channel grow. Like this video, subscribe, and comment below, and be sure to hit the bell icon so you get an alert every single time I upload a video. Thanks again for watching, and until next time.